How does Marc Gasol look in Toronto? Is Tobias Harris the missing piece in Philly? Has the top of the East improved enough to make it interesting in the playoffs? The only question left is, say it with me, you win. Hey, sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the BBall Breakdown Podcast. As always, I'm joined by Jared Weiss, who writes words on the NBA for The Athletic.
That's what I do.
That's right. Great to have you here again, as always.
It's great to talk words on the BBall Breakdown Podcast.
Yes, enough with the written stuff. Let's get to the talking part. So we are here, we are talking, we're interacting, we are looking at each other as well. Jared, let's talk Eastern Conference. Let's talk what the teams at the top did to get better at the deadline, or which teams didn't do things to get better. And I think we have to start off with, why don't we start off at the top with Toronto and them picking up Marc Gasol, and then we can kind of throw in Jeremy Lin at the end there. But what are your thoughts so far in the 3 games he's played for them?
So far, it's been not pretty. It's been kind of weird, which is fine. It's what we expected. I think we talked about this on the trade deadline special, that he's a guy that can potentially raise their ceiling more than any of these other acquisitions that were made at the deadline, but he's also the weirdest fit at this point. He's coming off the bench, which probably is a good thing, frankly, considering that he just turned 34. Did he turn 34 before he got? Yeah, it's right, just before he got traded. But so, you know, at his age, it ain't a bad thing in the regular season to be playing 20 minutes a game, and they're probably going to bump that up a lot. Their big question will be, how do they finish games? And Serge Ibaka's been playing really well this year, and especially in the last few games. I almost called him Pablo Francisco. Pascal Siakam, not Pablo Francisco, the noted comedian from the 2000s. He had an insane game. He had the best game of his career right before we taped this. So that is showing that they have to rely on him, and they have to finish the game, trying to kind of maximize Siakam's opportunity to get out and run and make all the they don't run and he plays for him. He scored probably the first person ever to score 40 points where they didn't really call a single play for him except for like one corner pick and roll with Kyle Lowry, it seemed like. So, you know, Gasol is already making them a better distribution team. You can just see that the ball, everybody's cutting when he's out there. People just believe that he's going to pass, and I think that does so much for them that in the regular season, it's usually about like not having a part of the game where you just collapse. I don't know if that's quite as important in the playoffs, because generally you have a couple people from your starting lineup out there as much as possible, but Gasol will just be that guy that bridges whatever lineup they have.
Right. You know, what's interesting is I've seen a little bit of evidence of like triangle offense when he's been out there, which is really interesting. They're doing some pinch post stuff, which is great for him. They even threw the ball in the low post once and had 2 cutters split from the wing and the corner off of him, or cut to the basket off him, which is like the old school triangle. So that was interesting to me to begin with. But yeah, he looked pretty bad against Brooklyn. And he was better. I'm sorry. He looked good against Brooklyn. He looked pretty bad against Washington, and then his first game against the Knicks also just discombobulated. And I would say he looked rusty, but he'd been playing all year, so it's not like he'd been missing games. So I don't know which version of Gasol they're getting. Is he any better than Valanciunas is when he's healthy? Like I don't know, because Valanciunas was very helpful to them. Well, I will say that Gasol is more mobile, even at this age. I feel like on the defensive end. So, yeah, I think he'll be able to help him a little bit more when he plays. But, yeah, I think that what Ibaka does when he plays center for them, he unlocks a lot of things in that small ball that works for them and makes them very difficult to deal with. So, throwing Gasol out there and kind of going old school traditional is interesting. But good to see that Siakam can still have a great game in that mix as well. And they're going to need everybody on board ready to go when they get to the playoffs. It's just still not clear to me if they're completely ready, and if Kawhi gives them enough of the mindset, and then LeBron not being in the East to overcome what was seriously an issue with them, not being able to perform in the playoffs.
Sure. And I mean, a big thing with Gasol is that one thing you have to remember is when you get to the playoffs, these guys are going to be running a lot of simple actions, especially in crunch time where defenses are ratcheted up, and being able to have a really good pick and pop or pick and roll, just having like a great big man for the PNR scheme is so huge. And I guess Siakam should be able to do it in theory pretty well, and Ibaka's been pretty good at it, but Gasol I think is at a different level where he's a much more, I mean, the numbers haven't been great, but like we know that Marc Gasol can bury a three whenever he wants to. And we know that he can do those short rolls. He can pretty much do anything on the pick and roll. And he's a more dynamic pick and roll partner than any of those guys. And I mean, Kawhi doesn't really run that much of it, so I guess it wouldn't matter for him. But for Lowry, who has kind of struggled to shot create this year compared to in the past, but has been a really good distributor at the same time, I think this just makes things even easier for him. So Gasol I feel like his main role is just to kind of make everything easier for everybody.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, he's not going to take a lot of threes, but he certainly could hit them, and he certainly can pass really, really well. So that should also help them. So it's a net plus for them, and certainly when you're looking at the top 4 teams and what they did or didn't do, that's got to be at the top of the list right now for what we see until we see someone like Mirotic on the court and figure out what that looks like. But let's talk about Tobias Harris in Philly, because I just did a video on it, and it was pretty impressive. I have to tell you, it was a total buzzkill watching them play the Celtics and get beat again, and having Tobias be very average only because he looked so good and it felt like, okay, this is going to be it. This is going to change the tables for them. And but even still, it clearly gives them the best starting 5 east of the Bay Area, and he's fitting in wonderfully well so far.
I mean, I think I called them Warriors East before, which is feels sacrilege, but like, I mean, they're stacked beyond belief, so it kind of makes sense in a way. But I feel like he just solved all of their issues as far as being too locked into having one perimeter playmaker. We already went over that kind of stuff. As far as fit so far, I mean, he's been fitting in great. That Celtics game, I would call it an anomaly from the general trend in that the Celtics just match up so unbelievably well against Philadelphia. They have for a year straight now. They've just had Philadelphia's number. And also, I guess, Joel Embiid, he can't post up Horford, but I feel like Philly just still hasn't figured out what do we do with our offense instead of posting him up. Like running more pick and roll, for instance, would be a good way to do it, but they don't really run that much pick and roll in that offensive scheme. And I mean, this is just such a perfect fit for Harris, who, was he wasn't quite what the Clippers needed to be a top tier team, because he just isn't that number one guy. He's a bit passive. He picks his spots. But when he picks his spots, he executes almost every single time. So him being the 3rd/4th option in that Philadelphia offense, I mean, it's such a perfect fit for him. And he's been great in getting out in transition. And I feel like a lot of the time when they're getting out in transition, it's like Simmons or Embiid gets the rebound, and then he's running, and they're able to get it to him at half court, and he's like in full control of the transition play from there. And it's just going to make them a lot more deadly of a transition team, which is, I think, the thing that he probably impacts them more so on, rather than just like, their half-court offense is so hard to solve now because there's very, very limited weaknesses.
Right. Although it's interesting because I showed some clips in the video where when they post him up and they have like Boban in there and Simmons in there, there's like no spacing. It's weird. It's old school 80s look. But you know what? The point is if you're going to post up, you're going to get a good shot from there. And if you try and help close in, you can quickly hit the other guy who's open for a layup. So they're figuring some things out there. The revelation I thought for me was how he can bring the ball up coast to coast. He can grab the rebound and then lead the break or just lead the offense and start it there. And that just opens up things for everybody else who can just fan out and get into space earlier without having to deal with that. And I thought that's a big thing. And then that connects directly to limiting Jimmy Butler's usage percentage, which has plummeted since Tobias Harris got there. And that's a really, really good thing. I think in this team, Butler can't be as dominant as he thinks he needs to be. And by putting a guy like Tobias Harris in there who's going to hit threes, catch and shoot, he can run a little pick and roll, he can just sort of be the facilitator and keep the glue together. That's what's going to make Jimmy Butler like even more difficult for everybody to handle on the defensive end.
And do you think they can make that work with Jimmy? Like, do you think Jimmy's going to have full buy-in and that's going to last the entire playoff run?
Well, I guess what would that look like if he doesn't? He's going to start forcing more shots and isoing. Is that the idea?
I guess so.
I
mean, Jimmy's really good, so he can do it and they can still win.
Yeah, right. But it's not as their best version of themselves. Or does he kind of get into like crazy mode where he just makes life miserable for people mentally, like in the locker room and all those things we've seen him do, which I thought was a great move by the Sixers to bring in 2 guys in Tobias Harris and Boban who will lighten the locker room and really give them a whole other sunnier disposition that they probably didn't have as much before that, because Ben Simmons is kind of blah. I mean, you've been around Ben a little bit, haven't you?
I have. He Blaza word I would use. Yeah.
He's not like, he's not the life of the party, right?
He's not a vocal positive presence, at least out in the public eye. Obviously that changes behind closed doors. I've heard a lot of stuff about Ben that I'm not going to go into now, but I know that things can be difficult in bringing the best out of him. I guess is the way I put it.
Okay. Well, either way, but that's I'm not trying to say he's a negative guy in the locker room. I just think he's kind of neutral. But Embiid has got to be he is the life of the party. But you could always use another couple guys that work hard but can kind of also lighten that mood. So I feel like that's another nice balance that they brought in that should help them. Just to balance out Jimmy, because I think Jimmy could be a real problem if he starts to go down that path and other people cling on to him, and then that sinks everybody. So I just don't think that would happen. But yes, be on the lookout for Butler 10 games into this to be like, F this, man, I've gone down from 24% usage to 16, which is 25%, like a quarter of his usage. Hopefully he'll still be winning and he'll say that's great. And I think that he will, but we'll have to see.
I want to give Jimmy the benefit of the doubt. I mean, the dude's a hardcore winner. Obviously the Minnesota situation was a disaster, but he'll murder anyone that he has to get that W. He's a good playmaker. He's always been a pretty willing playmaker. He's a pretty, he's not a growth mindset kind of guy, to use Brad Stevens speak. He's very much a fixed mindset kind of guy. He does things the way he does them. He wants to be kind of, an almost 90s style, point forward type of player. But his grit, his confidence, those are the things that they need from him in the playoffs. Like, him being that asshole is the thing that they really need him to help them get over the hump when they're competing against a Toronto team that has a lot more experience, although for most of them their experience is in getting knocked out in the second round. And Milwaukee, who doesn't quite have that experience, but they're kind of going through that, what the Thunder went through a decade ago and the Warriors went through, where they got to the playoffs, got knocked out in a competitive first round series, and all of a sudden they're a 60-win team, and they could make that leap to being a conference finals or finals team. And obviously, I think we agreed they've been the best team in the Eastern Conference this year, maybe probably the best team in the NBA this year, even though the Warriors are still better than them overall. So Philly needs, they need all of their personalities to explode and clash, but work together to clash and direct that towards the opponent, and that's when they become super dangerous.
Right. And by the way, that was an awesome segue to the Bucks. So I don't want to steer us away from that, because we were just for a second there and about to talk about a team that's kind of made the playoffs, and now they're a 16-win team. Let's go there, because the Bucks, they didn't want to feel left out as well, and so they did a nice deal by picking up Mirotic. Who's a guy that seems to help wherever he goes, but he just has a hard time staying healthy consistently across his career. We haven't seen him yet in the court, but what do you think about him and how he's going to fit with in Budenholzer's offense?
Well, they can put him into Ilyasova's role, except he's way better, so that's pretty perfect. I mean, he's so good that it makes you wonder if they're going to close out games with him in there and Giannis at the 5. It depends on matchup. I mean, Lopez has been so damn good, it doesn't seem like it would make any sense to do that, but it gives them that hot hand opportunity to decide who are the 5, or who are the 4 guys that are shooting the best that night, and decide to close with them if the matchup dictates it. So I mean, he just significantly upgrades over what Ilyasova was giving them. They've got a pretty great 8-man rotation for the playoffs, and they just perfectly balance. They're just perfectly balanced. I mean, I love this team.
Yeah. I agree. Also because, all they had to give up was Thon Maker. So a guy that really wasn't playing anyway, and he doesn't give them any. Maker at some point was shooting threes and playing good defense, but it's a totally different kind of a thing here. Now, obviously, Mirotic is not going to give them the defensive presence they need, but that's okay because he'll stretch it. He can play the small ball 4. Stretch the defense out.
And they've had the best defense in the NBA this year anyway, so it's not like they need a defensive
right, they can cover for him.
The big problem is, and I think I heard another podcast address this, so I don't want to copy what they did, but Milwaukee's in a deep drop scheme. So every single time there's a pick and roll, Brook Lopez, if he's defending it, he's going to retreat back to the dotted circle in the paint, and they're going to invite dribble penetration. Now that means that they're going to give up a ton of threes above the break, but they're also going to never really allow penetration to the rim, and that's how it's played out this year. But if they're going up against a team in the second round, if things hold, they're probably going to face either Boston or Philly. Maybe Indiana holds up there, but either way, they're probably going to face one of those teams in the second round, and those are two teams that could potentially light them up from up top, and then they have to potentially change their scheme, go to a switching scheme. I think that's where things get really complicated. Maybe that's when Giannis comes in at the 5 and Lopez hits the bench and you put Mirotic, but I'd assume you'd rather have Lopez out there anyway, just because he's shown he's a good defender, and Mirotic doesn't really give, Mirotic's relative smaller size isn't really made up for with like more quickness and ability to switch on ball screens. Like he's just not. I think Lopez might be better anyway with that.
For sure. They have a lot of options here and what they can do. And the only question now is when is he getting the court, and can they fuse these guys together and get a rhythm before the playoffs start? It's weird. The All-Star game is now so late that there's only about 25 games left in the season now for all these guys. And it's going to be a real rush job here to get him on the court. I don't even know. Do you know what Mirotic's, prognosis is and when he's going to get back?
I think he's probably going to be back in I guess it's the Celtics is going to be their game after the All-Star break. So I'll be watching that one, I guess. So that'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, right. That's right. On February 21st when they come back.
Yeah, 21st. So he should be back for that one. Okay, good.
So we'll see. Again, I don't have a lot of faith in him staying healthy anyway. But if he can, then he's going to be a real problem for everybody else. And he'll really help them. Of course, there's still the issues with Bledsoe that I have that Bucks fans don't see, but I do. But we'll find out. And by the way, like DJ Wilson is a revelation to me. Love the guy. Love the way he plays. He's like that Thon Maker but he's actually like contributing what they thought Thon could do. And I don't even really know him that well. Do you remember where he went to college?
God damn it!
I got all these questions for you. He went to Michigan.
Yeah, we looked this up before. It was Michigan.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I don't even have in my mind's eye a picture of him playing at Michigan because I think obviously we've seen them in the tournament a lot the last several years. But anyhow, a great little pickup for them. It's a huge weekend for the NBA as Giannis and LeBron battle forces in the NBA All-Star Game. And that means there is only one place to get in on all this action, and it's called betonline.ag. Sports, casino, virtual casino, you name it. betonline.ag is CLNS Media's preferred sportsbook online. Place your pick for the All-Star Game this weekend by going online to sign up today at clnsmedia.com/win. Try in-game live betting where you can participate in all the action with every play. Use the promo code CLNS50 for a 50% cashback bonus on first deposit. That's clnsmedia.com/win, and the code is CLNS50. BetOnline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. Now, let's move over to the Celtics here because they didn't do anything. Except we found out how unhappy they are in the locker room, supposedly. Although it still doesn't.
That's not true, though. They did salary dump Jabari Bird, so they did make a move at the deadline.
Okay, so long, farewell, Jabari
I'm
Bird.
kidding, but they're probably going to sign someone at some point to that extra spot. I mean, the Celtics, the debate that has raged on in the last few days, which happens every time Kyrie Irving has to sit out because his knee is funny, is. Are they better without Kyrie Irving? And people freak out over that conversation because it's a conversation that's held by the hot take machines at all the national talk shows or local sports radio, which is a total dumpster fire, which is why we do these podcasts. But the one thing about Kyrie sitting out is that their offense, they run the offensive system that Stevens has been running for the past few years a lot more effectively when they don't have someone dominating the ball, because that whole system is generally non-ball dominant. So they run their offense more to how it's built, and they can put out a better defensive lineup without Irving out there. So they can have a bunch of games where they're better without Irving, or I should say their offense moves more smoothly without Irving. But in the playoffs, that team would probably not do very well, especially against, like last year, they had that remarkable run and all that, and it was great, and they were playing really well, but the quality of the teams in the East last year were a joke. Like, those teams are like as good as like Brooklyn is this year.
Okay.
The teams at the top of the East are so much better. It's insane. Yeah, I think this year's Brooklyn team would probably make the conference finals in last year's East. Like the quality of the teams were not good. That Cavaliers team was so horrendous. It was just LeBron was having another GOAT run. But so the the degree of difficulty is so much higher, and there are just times in the playoffs where your system doesn't work, and you need a great player who can do ISO or pick and roll or get out in transition that can be your offense for you, especially in crunch time, and that's why you have guys like Irving. That's why you have Kawhi Leonard. Like, that's what those stars do. It's in the playoffs that everything breaks down, and that's where they come in.
Well, but the question then becomes is you still need Tatum and Brown and the young guys to come in and really give you good minutes and help. And that's the question is Kyrie going to get his and do what he can do at the expense of those guys doing well? Or can they all do well together, and can Kyrie figure that out as well? Or is it not Kyrie's issue either way, that they don't play as well, maybe with him versus without? Certainly worthy of a video, perhaps, if I jumped on some footage. But that would be what I'm the most scared about, because I just don't really feel it, right? I mean, I know we're all about feelings here in the NBA. And that's what I have to be worried about with the Celtics, is that I just don't know. I just don't feel it from them right now. And that might be what I'm kind of tapping into what Morris was talking about, of how, maybe they're not happy. I mean, has that changed since he said that?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to be happier together. That's true. But it's been something that's been noticeable for a while. And, there's guys on this team that just feel a little bit disconnected from the other guys, and you see them get upset when they check out sometimes. I mean, I resisted the narrative that guys need more touches for a long time, and then the more I talk to players, the more I talk to people that work with these players and talk to their camps, they were all just like, I just need more touches. Like, that's pretty much it. And I think people are mostly assuming that from the outside because it's a simplistic narrative, and that's all they can really muster because they don't know what's really going on in the court at a high level. But yeah, that's what most of these guys are straight up saying. It's like, I need to get 12 shots a game. I need to get the plays called for me so that I can feel my rhythm, and then we play off of that. And it doesn't really happen a ton. And a part of it is like Stevens, he doesn't ride the hot hand usually. It's pretty uncommon for him to see a guy that is really feeling it and call 3 plays in a row for him, unless it's Kyrie, obviously.
Well, although, generally with Stevens' offense, calling a play doesn't necessarily mean that you're calling for a specific shot from a specific person. That's the other thing. It's really calling an action that's going to try and force a closeout, and then you can kick out and get some movement and that kind of thing. And that's what's interesting, because then you don't really know, that the hot hand thing, that's where it plays into, because, a guy might get open ahead of time and get that shot, and that's a good shot too. So that is a thing that, I guess they're going to have to kind of, if they're not used to it by now, I don't know what's going to change going forward, but
they are.
Yeah, but I think what you mean is, and that's the thing is, I don't even know if it's the shots per se. I think it's the touches themselves, the energy that you get by being part of the offense and by touching the ball and moving it even is something that's vital for a lot of teams. And when you don't get that could very well be, and you go 3-4 possessions in a row, you don't score, and now you got guys who are upset. And by the way, Morris of all the players is going to be the most upset for not getting his shots. And he's been doing really nicely, just sort of, I'm not going to call him a gunner per se, but he really likes to get those shots up. But
he's a career gunner.
Yeah, okay,
absolutely. But it's changed. It has changed this year, though.
And as long as he's making them at a decent clip, then it's like that's fine. We've seen plenty of players be able to do on championship teams do that. But that's the whole key here, is that if they don't feel part of it, the defense suffers. And certainly the locker room atmosphere suffers as well. Now, and that's the other problem is we're talking about the life of the party here. Like, who is the life of the party in the Celtics? Who is that guy that's lighting in the room when he walks in?
Yabu. Aaron Baines, who's been out.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, Baines, Marcus Smart. Those are the guys, I would say.
Yeah. And they're not the leaders, quote unquote. So
yeah, Smart has become in the last year and a half, but that's their problem, is that the role players are the spirit of the team. Kyrie isn't quite. That's not quite his leadership style. But they are more disjointed than I think that everyone on the outside and them expected. There were clearly some concerns coming into it. Some guys just weren't really ready, and then there was the whole numbers game issue. But frankly, I think they overreact a lot of the time. Let me rephrase. I think Morris's words revealed why they overreact, because they go on these 8-game winning streaks and then they have a mediocre week stretch, which this is what a normal team looks like, and you just had an 8-game winning streak. That's why you're at the top. But I think the fact that Morris said that we're not having fun and we're not connecting and stuff like that, that shows why they keep having these things happen. I think part of it is that Kyrie tends to, Kyrie is too honest publicly as well, in that he keeps bringing these things up, and that causes the issue as well. But these guys just, they don't seem to let things blow over like they should. And maybe that's just because their losses usually tend to be really humiliating losses. They get blown out, or they just like completely collapse, stuff like that. But I mean, then I'm sure they're probably going to go on like a 6-game winning streak, and then it's going to seem like everything's fine, and we're going to have 2 weeks of narratives of the Celtics are juggernauts again, and then they're going to fall apart again. That's how it's always going to happen.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about how we see the Eastern Conference unfolding going forward. Right now, as of when we're taping this, the Bucks are in first, game ahead of the Raptors. The Pacers are just right behind them at 5.5 games, and then the Celtics are 6.5 games behind, and then the Sixers. Wait a minute, is this the right year? Wow. You know what? I haven't even really studied this. The Sixers are fifth place, tied with the Celtics, or whatever, they will tie for fourth. I don't even know if I really fully comprehended that. But yeah, what do we see going forward now that they have Tobias Harris and now the other guys have their new guys from the trades? How do you think we're gonna end up with the conference seedings in the top?
Okay, well, I guess the first question is, do you think the Pacers are going to fall back?
They should, right? They lost Oladipo, and yet they haven't dropped.
They're defying all odds. It's Coach of the Year, Nate McMillan. If it's not going to go to Bud, it should go to him. It's got to go to Bud, obviously. But it's
Malone,
insane. No, it's got because Indy, they're not nearly as talented as Denver, and what they're doing. I mean, it depends. If they have a huge drop off, then sure. But what McMillan's doing is amazing because they've just built such a good defense, and Miles Turner has been defending so well. Best interior defender in the NBA probably right now. Probably is like the dark horse defensive player of the year candidate. I don't know how they're getting their offense. Like, I don't understand how that's still happening, because it's like Thad Young, Bogdanovich. It's like these guys are not guys you expect to really put that up in lieu of Oladipo.
Right.
They're mystifying, and there's no way to predict what they're going to do.
Yes, that is true. And in fact, I need to get some eyeballs and really to study what's going on here in the last 10 games since Oladipo's been gone. But if I really quickly look at their numbers, in those last 10 games, they've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so they're 6 and 10. It looks like that's pretty good. It's a nice clip for them, considering they didn't have they lost their guy and they were able to adjust on the fly. So he definitely should be the top 3 for Coach of the Year. But other than that, is there going to be significant movement? Because again, there's hardly any games left, and with 25 games left for everybody, you can't expect anyone to jump more than about 2 games. Maybe
3.
Maybe, let's say 3. That's a high 3. So now you're talking about, let's just say the Sixers move up 3 games. That's still going to be, second or third. They're not going to get any, I don't even think they get the second if the other guys keep winning.
I don't think they're going to catch the Raptors. Raptors would have to fall off a cliff for that to happen.
Right.
So it
looks like third.
It looks like that top 4 group is set in stone.
Yeah, I guess the one team will be the Pacers. They're probably going to drop, but, so they drop down to 6th or whatever. Still formidable. And with a good record. So, okay, the Bucks finish first, you think?
Yeah, I think they'll hold on to it. I mean, they haven't even gotten Mirotic yet.
Right. All right. And then, then the Raptors?
Yeah, I don't see any reason for them to have a big drop-off. They're getting by right now with while they're still trying to figure out their system. And, I mean, Van Fleet getting hurt, being out for almost the rest of the regular season is definitely going to hurt them a little bit. But they just got Jeremy Lin, who we barely have to scratch the surface on. He can't replace what Fred can do, but he at least is serviceable. Oh,
and in the playoffs, when they're all healthy playing, Jeremy Lin's going to go into a game. I bet you he'll win a game. He's going to play 12 minutes. He's going to hit 2 really big threes and throw a dime right when they need it, and it's going to be huge. So mark those words. I think Lin's going to really help them. In one big game they need him to help him in. So I think that's a great pickup for them.
Okay, I'll mark him down.
Mark it down. Now, okay, so Philly and Boston, you think, okay, let's just pretend maybe they both leapfrog over the Pacers. That's reasonable. Do you think Philly's going to be over Boston by the time the season's over?
God, I don't think so. Oh my God, Boston matches up so perfectly. They have to change the way they use Embiid if they're going to beat Boston, I think. I think it's the only way it happens.
So so Boston has to hope that they're 4th and the Sixers are 5th.
I guess. Well, Boston could try to get to the 3 and then face Brooklyn.
Yeah, I'm just thinking and if Boston plays the Sixers in the first round, they might like that. Although, you know what, the Celtics could be 5th and the Sixers could be 4th, and that might still work for Boston.
Well, they would face each other, and then
but it's not home court.
Yeah, well, Philly would have home court. They want Indy to fall out and reach a 3 seed so they can face Brooklyn and have a much easier first round, and then face whomever in the second round.
Yeah, that
they would
sounds
face
fair.
Toronto probably in the second round then. So.
Fair enough. So they get the 3 seed, then they got Toronto. Yeah, it's rough after that anyway, which is nice because we haven't had a second or third round in the East that's been too difficult for a while. So we all win.
Hey, this is the year it finally happens.
I hope so. So we'll see. Well, listen, Jared, I think we covered what we needed to cover today.
Yeah, we finally solved the East, and then we got to solve the West next week.
Okay, you're on. Let's do it. I'll be doing it from Florida, so my voice will be warmer.
It actually, just before we go, is there anything in All-Star Weekend that you actually give a crap about?
Oh, I used to think no, although I was watching the highlights of the dunk contest from whatever year that was with Aaron Gordon. And I was
16, yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was really creative what they were doing. And I don't think it's matched that since then, right?
I mean, it's only been 2 years, but yeah, last year's dunk contest was mediocre. The Levine Gordon battle is probably like a top 5 dunk contest ever.
For sure.
That was so iconic.
Even higher.
It could be the best ever, honestly. I mean, the dunk over. It's funny. I forget. It might have been SB Nation did a quiz of what is your signature dunk, and you'd fill out a little questionnaire. And I had just been watching the one where Aaron Gordon jumps over their mascot, and literally jumps his butt over the mascot's head and does the ball under his butt, which is, I think, the best dunk I've ever seen in my life. And I was just thinking about that dunk, and then I did the questionnaire, and that came up as my signature dunk. And I'm like, wow, I really am a predictable human being. Or wow, the algorithms have really figured us out. But I'll never forget. I think that's the best dunk ever. I'm trying to think of one. I mean, the Vince Carter, 360 windmill is probably the most iconic dunk ever. And then that and MJ or Dr. J from the free throw line. Those are probably more memorable, but as far as degree of difficulty and remarkable dunks, that's got to be it.
Yeah, I mean, and Levine was doing things from the free throw line on the way that Michael could just hold it up there and then dunk it, where he was double pumping and whatever. It was crazy.
Through the legs, windmill, yeah.
And you can't really blame Dominique and Michael because there just wasn't the kind of creativity. They didn't even think of doing those things. They probably could do some of them, but no one ever sat down to really think about how creative can they get. So I mean, skills challenge used to be somewhat interesting to me, but I don't know. The game is not interesting either. So I'm just going to be looking forward to being on the beach and getting in the ocean a little bit.
Yeah, the one thing that's fun about the skills challenge is just seeing bigs versus guards. So that's fun. Especially because it's proven that was a great move that they did, because it's proven to be every year you really have no idea who's going to pull it off. Now with the bigs are so skilled, they can pull it off. I'd like to see Jokic do it. I feel like Jokic would nail every little thing, but he's so slow it might take him 5 minutes just to get up and down the floor.
Right, yeah. Well, we'll see. I'll have to keep my eye on that one. I don't think I've watched it in a couple of years, so I'll watch it this year if I can. But anyhow, thank you so much for coming on the show again, Jared, as always, every week that you're on with me. And thank you everyone out there for listening to our podcast and getting this far. And don't forget, sports fans, at BBall Breakdown, our channel, we're conversation. You in? Are you in, Jared?
I'm in all-star mode, baby.